So 2015 has started with horrible events in Paris. Last week, terrorist attacks killed 17 people, including cartoonists at magazine Charlie Hebdo's offices and customers at a kosher supermarket. After the attacks, European ministers called for more EU controls of the borders and the sharing of airlines passengers' data to help security services fighting terrorism. To discuss on the question, should we give up one of our fundamental rights, including data privacy, to enforce our security? That's the question and the debate of our first You Talking to Me of the year. My two guests to debate on this are two members of the European Parliament. On my left, Sajjad Karim, you member of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group. Hello. And Mr. Philipp Albrecht, you are a member of the Greens Group.
Hello.
Hello and welcome. So, following the terrorist killings, a new era of travel surveillance is expected to be introduced in the European Union. Philipp Albrecht, you're responsible for data protection legislation in the European Parliament. And right after the first attack, you shared your opinion by tweeting, "To all those calling for surveillance measures, now France is already retaining telecom and PNR data for years, but it didn't prevent Charlie Hebdo's attack." So, Mr. Albrecht, do you think so? You posted that right less than 2 hours after the announcement of the attack. Do you think this was the right moment to post this tweet?
I think that it's important that we first show solidarity, and I did that also on Twitter. But of course, there have been already people announcing that now we need to have more security measures on the type of data retention. And I think that there needs to be somebody explaining that obviously those measures are already in place and didn't prevent these measures, these attacks. So we need to talk also about other reactions, not only about data retention, and we also need to analyze in how far blanket data retention is effective.
So why you don't believe that it is not effective, the data of sharing passengers, airlines passengers, such as names? I mean, it could help security services.
Absolutely. If we would retain all data of everybody every time, we would have far more security. But that would be a surveillance state, a preventive state. We don't want that. We want to have focused investigation into risks and suspicions we already have. And in these cases, like with former attacks, we can see that there have been information with the security services. The attackers have been in the Schengen information system. But there was obviously not enough power and focus of the police and security authorities to go after the right information. And sometimes I ask myself that this is obviously also because there's too much information available on many persons, but too less focus on those information on suspicious and risky persons.
So, Mr. Karim, we have to remind that the European Parliament is still blocking the sharing of passengers' names records, but Great Britain is in favor of it.
As a country, the United Kingdom has been in favor of sharing intelligence in order to help thwart any future attacks taking place. I certainly, myself, as a British Conservative, however, have voted against certain measures when it has come to sharing data with the United States of America. I think it is important that we do not allow the people that are carrying out these terrorist activities to achieve through our reactions something that they could never achieve through their own actions. Our fundamental rights are absolutely paramount to the basics upon which our European Union is built, and we cannot give those up at any cost.
But if the passenger names record are just sharing within the European Union, could that help our security? I mean, should we give up one or two of our fundamental rights to ensure our security?
Well, there simply has not been enough sharing of intelligence between EU member states. That is a basic fact. And any measures we can take, any measures that are actually going to be productive rather than counterproductive or completely useless, any measures that are actually constructive and productive must be put into place. And this is where we need to do a huge amount of work to identify which are the useful measures and how can we best ensure that our intelligence is better shared.
So even the European Court of Justice last April considered the 2016 data retention directive invalid because it goes against our fundamental rights, data privacy. But Mr. Albrecht, what do you propose instead of these big border measures, as you call them?
I have to say that obviously we agree that there needs to be a sharing of more information on risks and suspicions which are out there. That's what we want. Information which is gathered by police authorities and also intelligence authorities already today on jihadists, on radicalized persons, on those who plan organized crime or even terrorist attacks. They have been there, but they are not shared by the member states quickly enough. So we need to invest into police authorities to cooperate better on European level and to focus on these suspicions and collect data on those people who are risky and suspicious. That's important. But also I think we need to talk about the way how we try to reduce radicalization in the European Union. I think that's important, and that cannot be done by any law. We need to invest into a secure society, and we need to talk about how to achieve that.
But
do you agree with Mr.
Just to add to this, actually, many of our member states already have measures in place that we can build upon. For instance, we have a fundamental right of freedom of movement within the European Union for our citizens. However, many of our member states, including my own, actually have provisions within the existing criminal structures that we have in place to restrict the movement of people. And therefore, we need to build upon those. That's not a compromise on our fundamental freedom. That is use of basic existing criminal provisions to make sure that we thwart the ability of such people to carry out any further attacks.
So before we continue on the security of EU's borders, let's have a look at our Facebook comments. So on Facebook, Sven wrote, "We have to learn from the Patriot Act in the US. Less freedom is not the solution and doesn't prevent any terrorist attacks, such as in Boston." And an opposite view comes from Lenka, who wrote, "It's not a question of freedom. When you're dead, you haven't any freedom after. We have to control all the jihadists." So we can see that there is a different and share opinion of view. So another big point is the enforcement of the EU's external border with Schengen, who is linked with that allows free travel between the member states. So, Mr. Karim, should we modify Schengen's rules to enforce our security?
I think there needs to be a tightening of borders in terms of when people are trying to enter into rather than just dealing with movement within. That is an issue in itself as well. We have a situation at the moment where we have quite a large number of European Union citizens who have made their way to places like Syria in order to partake in activities there in relation to some of the conflict that is happening there, and they are far too easily able to gain access back into the European Union without their member state actually being aware that they are back in the European Union. And we need to fundamentally make sure that we have much stronger border controls in place.
But what are the limits of it? What are the limits of this control, Mr. Albrecht?
I mean, it's right that we need to better control the borders in a way that we know when those people re-enter the Schengen area and the European Union, and the exchange of information between the member states. That's the central point. I think that the limit to it would be the controls inside the European Union, because that would also somehow give up quite a huge success which we achieved in the European Union to cooperate and therefore get rid of internal borders. So we need to better exchange information, not build up new borders inside the European Union to get quickly access.
Yeah, but yes. On that point, we can actually build upon existing measures that member states have themselves in order to control the movement of people without affecting the fundamental right of freedom of movement. Use the existing criminal provisions that we already have.
But controlling, I mean, as the Spain's interior minister said, we have to aim at those people who are suspicious about being terrorists. But how can we be sure that we don't aim at all of European citizens?
I think it's very easy to answer that question, because there are quite a lot of files and databases where we collect suspicions, and all the police and security authorities, they have their own suspicions. If we share this information quickly and get access to it also from those authorities where people might just end up being and planning attacks, then we have done already a huge step to improve the situation. But the problem is that obviously, although we seem to agree here that we should focus on these suspicious and risky people, at the moment we are talking about retaining data of non-suspects. So that's an important decision to be taken now, and I plead that we focus on the exchange of information on suspicious and risky persons.
So is it dangerous for freedom of movement for the European citizens in the economic bloc?
Well, I think at this moment in time there is very clearly a debate that is taking place, and it is important that all voices are a part of that debate, and at some stage policymakers, both at a national level and indeed here at an EU level, we are going to have to strike the right balance between protecting the fundamental rights and indeed protecting our citizens' security as well.
So before we wrapping this program, I would like to ask you in 30 seconds to answer. So this attack will push the European Union, European governments to make some new proposals, some new rules. They're already talking about that. Mr. Juncker, the president of the European Commission, said we don't have to urge this and to wait. So what do you the most afraid of seeing in the following weeks, months?
What I'm the most afraid
of seeing changing of which laws, which proposals will be on the table.
I'm afraid that we choose the way of symbolic reactions to achieve just a higher feeling of security, instead of following the path of effective security measures on the basis of our values. That's what we need to follow, and that means following the risks, following the suspicions, and exchanging information European-wide. Therefore, the member states have to deliver.
And you, Mr. Karim?
I think it's important that we don't have new knee-jerk reactions. And the fact of the matter is, this is not the first time that we have been in this particular place. We have had this debate before. And one of the things that came about last time around was that, in fact, it was the European Union that had to step in to protect citizens' rights, where some of our national governments had gone too far. We must ensure that that does not happen this time around.
So let's wait and see. Thank you, both of you, for coming, and thank you, all of you, for following us. See you next time. Bye.